and welcome. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. The headlines this hour. Hamas says it won't send a delegation to hostage and ceasefire talks in either Cairo or Doha this Thursday. Lebanese media reports that Hezbollah has evacuated its stronghold in the Dakhiyat neighborhood of Beirut. And Tunisia's fragile democracy in question once again as the Electoral Commission allows just one challenger to run against the incumbent, Kais Saied. Hamas says it will not send a delegation to negotiate what's being billed as a last-ditch attempt to reach a ceasefire and hostage deal this Thursday. According to reports here in Israel, Hamas believes that Israel is using the negotiations to discourage Iran from launching an attack in retaliation for the killing of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran almost a fortnight ago. Our Middle East correspondent Arilos Aran has this report.
Talks for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal are set to resume on Thursday, but Hamas is signaling it will not attend. In a statement late Sunday, Hamas said it asked mediators to present a plan based on past negotiations, instead of engaging in a new round of talks for a deal based on amended frameworks.
Our position is clear. There is no need for additional negotiations. There are ideas proposed by the mediators that we have already accepted, and we are ready to implement them immediately. It is no longer acceptable to give the enemy additional time to carry out its aggression against the Palestinian people, and I believe the other factions will not accept that either.
Israeli sources said Hamas's statement is no more than a bargaining tactic, claiming the terror group was never meant to participate in Thursday's meeting, which is supposed to include Israeli, American, Qatari, and Egyptian officials.
Israel's war with Hamas. Is a ceasefire possible before the end of your term?
Still possible. The plan I put together, endorsed by the G7, endorsed by the UN Security Council, etc., is still viable. And I'm working literally every single day to and my whole team to see to it that it doesn't escalate into a regional war, but it easily can.
To that end, CIA Director Bill Burns and the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Brett McGurk, are expected to arrive in the region by Thursday, likely visiting Israel before heading to the summit in Doha or Cairo. But this might be challenging for domestic Israeli political reasons, as far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir warned that his party will leave the coalition if Israel goes ahead with the deal.
תראו, אני שומע את הדיווחים על מה שהולך לקרות ביום חמישי בדוחה או בקהיר, ואני מאוד מאוד מוטרד. הרי אנחנו קודשים את החמאס, וכל הדיווחים שאנחנו מקבלים בדרום זה שישראל מנצחת ומובילה. אז דווקא עכשיו ללכת לוועידה, דווקא עכשיו להרים לחמאס בזמן שאנחנו בשמון, כמו שאומרים. ואני כבר אמרתי את זה לראש הממשלה ולאנשיו, זה טעות ללכת לוועידות כאלה. זה טעות בכלל לשבת עם החמאס.
And so, as time continues to run out for the hostages, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will have to choose the survival of his government or the hostages.
Well, with me in the studio this hour, Avi Pazner is the former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy. Welcome, Avi. Good to have you with us.
Good evening, Laura.
And Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital is the former commander of the Special Forces in the IDF. Welcome, Doron, to you as well. So, Avi, all eyes very much on the 14th, this Thursday, when we are supposed to have these last chance negotiations to get the hostages home.
I think, Laura, we are making too much of this Thursday as the last chance. I think the Americans and the Europeans and maybe others, maybe also Egypt and Qatar, are building this up as if this is the last opportunity. There is no such thing as the last opportunity. I must tell you, I am not extremely optimistic about this meeting. First of all, Hamas is not going to come, first of all. They said it was not invited. It's not true. They were invited to send delegates, and apparently they don't. And why should they? Why should Sinwar now that maybe we are on the brink of what he really wants, Sinwar, maybe a regional war, why should he now go to a ceasefire and to a deal with Israel? Which interest does Sinwar now have to stop the fighting in Gaza, when maybe, I say maybe, hopefully not, Iran and Hezbollah are ready to strike Israel. So I do not believe, to my great regret, and it is a pity because of our hostages, every day that passes is a tragedy for them. I do not believe in this Thursday meeting. There will be another Thursday and another Thursday when the situation is clearer and when maybe we have a better chance to reach an agreement.
All right, Doron, do you agree with that? The other side of the coin, of course, is that Hamas is under significant pressure now. It's lost control of the Philadelphia corridor. Ismail Haniyeh is no longer with us. What are your thoughts on that?
So I would put prediction aside, or my optimism or pessimism. I think we should be proactive and we should play with our alliance. We need our alliance if there would be this conflict with Hezbollah and Iran, and if our alliance, the US, Europeans, the Egyptian, Qatar, not alliance, but in terms of the negotiation, say to us that this is an important convention and we have to, and this is a framework that we in some sense proposed in the beginning. We have to be proactive, we have to go to show our hands. If Hamas will find out that Hamas is not a partner, because Hamas is a mixed position, what Hamas says. He says basically we already accepted. There's no need for us to come. But anyway, we should play with our alliance, go and be proactive in this summit and see what's up.
Because it does seem it's as though Qatar and Egypt are pushing for this the most. They say we've put together a framework and we just need both sides to sign up on it.
I think Biden also, and
Biden, of course.
They want to, the US wants to dismantle, this is the fuse, they want to dismantle the Gaza thing. They know that if there's basically they want a ceasefire. We want the hostages, they want a ceasefire. If they get this, there's a break, maybe ceasefire with Hezbollah, ceasefire with the Houthis, which is less important, and then there's a window of opportunity for diplomacy. That's the game plan of the US. It can all be destroyed by one attack by Iran or Hezbollah.
Meanwhile, I want to talk about what happened in Gaza over the past couple of days. There was a strike on a disused school that the IDF says was a Hamas military base. And today, the IDF added 12 terrorists. So that brings to 31 the number of terrorists who were killed in that strike. And, of course, the world media went around with this headline, taking the Hamas version of events, saying that dozens of civilians were killed. We've seen this time and time again, haven't we, Avi?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time that so-called Ministry of Health of Hamas publishes a number. They said 90 and then more than 100. Nobody has counted the bodies, but the first reaction of the world media was to jump on this number and only then ask Israel, why did you do that? And then came a first list of 19 names of terrorists, and now a second one. And there are already 31 terrorists killed in this attack on the headquarters of Hamas, which hid behind, like it always does, behind civilians in a school. So, first of all, the number 90 or 100 is vastly exaggerated. And I think most of those killed were Hamas, and we regret if also civilians were killed in this operation, but we have to understand that Hamas is using the Gaza citizens as human shields. They always have done so, and that it is the responsibility of the Hamas if there are also civilians killed in this action.
And Doron, do you think the IDF has got better at getting on top of these stories and getting the information and the facts out to the media more quickly?
The IDF is doing a good job, all the time, credible job. Sometimes he waits for a while to get the credible facts, and then comes out.
This is a problem, you know, Doron.
Yeah, of course, it's a problem.
When you wait, you let the other party give his version.
Yeah, but then the other side of the coin, of course, when you lose credibility, then nobody will listen to you. So this is really the trade-off. I think I trust that the IDF took the precautions required, but I think we have to be very sensitive as we go forward in terms of civilian losses. It's tragic losses was said here, and we have to be very careful as we conduct our affairs forward.
Okay, thank you both for now. Well, late last night, reports emerged that Israeli intelligence had revised their assessment of when Iran may attack. Unnamed sources claimed that Iran and its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah would launch an attack before the planned ceasefire talks on Thursday. Arab countries, Europe, the United States and even the Vatican have all appealed to Tehran not to trigger a regional war. Well, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Israel is braced for an attack and is prepared.
We are in the days of vigilance and readiness. The threats from Tehran and Beirut may materialize, and it is important to explain to everyone that readiness, preparedness, and vigilance are not synonyms for fear and panic. In recent days, we have been devoting our time both to strengthening defenses and to creating offensive options in response, and also as an initiative, if required, anywhere and in any region, with the main goal being the protection of the citizens of the State of Israel.
Well, let me bring in now Dr. Menachem Merhavi. He's a Middle East expert at the Truman Institute and the Shalem Academic Center. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. So everyone had thought that the Iranians themselves had second thoughts about their plans to attack Israel. We're now hearing more and more unnamed security sources saying that there could be an attack in the next 24 hours. What are you reading into the messages coming out of Tehran?
Right. Good evening, and thanks for having me. I would not be fool enough to take a guess at what Iran will do in the next 12 or 24 hours, but I do think that Iran has widened the scope of its, I would say, of its interests in such a response. That is, I mean, the very fact, as you mentioned earlier, that the world appeals to Iran, to Tehran, to curb its action, that is very flattering in Iranian eyes. And I know it might sound odd to Western ears, but the very fact that Iran holds the keys to widening the conflict to a regional one and even beyond that, that in itself, from the certain Iranian perspective, is at least part of a revenge. I mean, the fact that it has the possibility of doing that.
Right, and we're also hearing that inside Tehran there is some kind of power struggle going on between the new so-called moderate President Pezeshkian and the more hardline Ayatollah Khamenei about whether to attack Israel, how to attack Israel. I mean, how accurate do you think that is?
No, it definitely makes sense, even though the fact that they let this information leak also is informative. My guess is that the leak came mainly from circles and not so much from the president, but the fact that it has is also telling, and in a way this is a continuation of an older struggle that dates back to the nuclear deal years, when the president's office, for example, Rouhani, was more moderate and tended to try to curb actions of the Revolutionary Guards with little success, we should say. I mean, his influence, and he knows that his influence is very limited on these circles, and yet he tries to voice, his advisor Zarif, for example, who was also part of this criticism at the Revolutionary Guard circles, and yes, he would like to not let them interfere with the line of foreign policy he wants to lead, which is more moderate and even somewhat, I would say, smiling towards the West.
And talking about smiling at the West, we all remember Javad Zarif, very well known in the West as being the face of the nuclear deal. He's the one that negotiated with the Western powers over the JCPOA. He's unexpectedly resigned from Pezeshkian's government. What does that tell us?
Yeah, well, I think he knew that he would not be approved by the Supreme Leader and by the committee that needs to approve of nominations like this, and he wanted to save himself the embarrassment. And in addition, in a way, as an advisor who does not need such an approval, he has the advantage of being closer to the ear of the president. So in a way, it's a way of bypassing actually the more formal, strict apparatus of the Iranian regime.
All right, Dr. Menachem Merhavi, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, Avi Pazner and Doron Avitala with me still in the studio. I mean, Avi, we literally had the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on the phone pleading with the Iranian president to not attack Israel and trigger a regional war. I mean, this is very flattering to the Iranians, isn't it?
Yeah, flattering maybe. I am not sure what kind of influence this has. I mean, it was not only the German Chancellor, also the French President and the British Prime Minister. They all, and maybe others too, we don't know, maybe some Arab countries too are pleading with Iran.
Yeah, we had the Jordanian
foreign minister was there. I'm sure that there are I'm sure there is a lot of pressure on Tehran, a lot of pressure. So whether it pleases them or not, I don't know. The question is whether does it influence them? Does it really influence their decision? Nobody can tell you. It's true. There is a discussion there between moderate and extremists, like there always was, by the way, in Iran. Maybe now the discussion is more in the open because the new president is considered a so-called moderate in Iran. But really, there is also strategic pressure. When America brings aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and this is also a kind of diplomatic pressure, strategic pressure on Iran. So there is a lot of pressure on Iran. But again, nobody has the answer. I think the answer lays in the head of the supreme leader, Khamenei. He will be the one to decide. I cannot guess what he will do, but I can tell you one thing, that Israel has to be well prepared for every eventuality, whether it's an attack only from Iran or with Hezbollah and the Houthis and others. We have to be prepared like we never were prepared for an attack.
All right, Avi, thank you. Dawn, do you think it would be a mistake to believe that the regime in Tehran is a rational actor? We know that Israel has made that mistake before when it comes to Hamas, because a lot of people are trying to assess their motives. You know, how far are they willing to go for Hamas? Do they want to lose everything potentially for Hamas? Or, you know...
I would put my logician hat, and I said there are different types of rationality. And I think from their perspective, they're fully rational. Their owner was hurt dramatically. There was assassination taking place to their guest. This is the culture of the East. We have to take it seriously. And we shouldn't forget that they are backed by a strong coalition. China, Russia, there's a strong coalition that backs them up. Now they have to weigh what to do. Whether a full-blown attack that really would extend to a regional war, they wouldn't want, and their allies wouldn't want. We don't want. So it's a strange game of like a little bit like in Tarantino Reservoirs, dogs, everybody's pointing the loaded gun at the other. And it would be hard to outguess what would they do, but we have to be prepared.
Yeah. The bottom line, I think, we have to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best.
And the interesting question, whether there be a coordinated attack. If they attack, whether the three fronts would be coordinated, because this is...
As in Hezbollah in the north.
Yeah. Because Hezbollah is a different time frame.
The Houthis in Yemen.
Yeah.
And Iran itself.
Hezbollah is a different time frames in terms of the attack, in terms of our citizens in the north. And Iran, it's a different time frames. Of course, the distance is huge. We know that. We remember the 14th of April. Houthis, they're like a rude player. But yeah, we have to be on the alert.
And when it comes to Israel's preparedness, I mean, is this the right time for the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister to be having a very public row? Yoav Gallant, the Defence Minister, saying that the Prime Minister had been speaking absolute nonsense when he talked about absolute victory over Hamas. I mean...
If you would have been looking for a worse time, you would not find it. I mean, we are really maybe on the verge of an attack against us.
But there was a flip side when Bibi was saying that Gallant is working with an anti-Israeli narrative.
Yes.
This is I mean, watch out what you say.
I mean, I think the Israeli public has to call the two of them to order.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not conceivable that in such a time, when we are in full preparedness and readiness for an Iranian Hezbollah attack, that you have the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister exchanging jibs. That is not done in a democratic country, in a country at war. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like children playing.
Right.
Where is the responsibility? One is the Prime Minister, the other one is Minister of Defense. We have a country to take care of. So, answering to your question, I give them an F in conduct in time of war.
Not very diplomatic conduct at all from the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister. But we know about the difficulties between the two.
Of course, there's a wedge between the military and the infrastructure of the military and Gallant, which basically in sync with the generals, and the political right-wing coalition. Of course, this is the wedge. It has to do with the hostage deal. It has to do with how to operate. It has to do with the concept of whatever complete victory. It has to do with how to handle things. This is,
but there are reports that the Prime Minister would quite like to be rid of his popular, I think it's fair to say, Defence Minister, but
I think
he can't do that.
I mean, he learned the lesson from the gallant the protest. This was really a crucial moment. I think he wouldn't do that. He would have to find an excuse much bigger and not in this time.
Yeah, and by the way, how can you change? Let's now forget about the political differences, but militarily, strategically speaking, we are maybe on the eve of a big war. Maybe, hope not, maybe. How can you now play politics and change the defense minister and call in, I don't know, Gideon Sa'ar for or anybody else with absolutely no experience, no knowledge of the situation now? I mean, this is a dangerous game. I do not believe that really the Prime Minister intends to do that now. I think it is more in order to frighten and to warn.
And to keep his base with him.
And to keep his base. I don't think he will do such a thing.
Perhaps. No. All right, but unnerving, to say the least.
Exactly.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, meanwhile, amidst all of this, the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has arrived in Moscow for talks with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin. It's his first trip to Moscow since 2021, though Russia did host talks earlier this year between Abbas's Fatah party and the rival Hamas. To talk more about that, we're joined by Anna Boshkovskaya, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute. Thank you for being with us, Anna. And tell us, why has Putin decided to insert himself into the conflict at this very critical moment, do you think?
First, it's a pleasure to be with you, as always. I think part of the answer already lies in your question. This is a critical moment. And Putin very much believes that Russia is a key player in the Middle East. He wants to keep Russia as a key player in the Middle East, as a country that serves as a mediator. And really, that is what Putin has been trying to do for many years now. He certainly restated this intent after October 7th. And to be a key player, at the very least, you have to have a seat at the table. So this is what Putin is doing. He's playing mediator at a key moment.
And Anna, do you think that part of this is Putin trying to distract from his own problems on the battlefield? We can see that the Ukrainians have had some significant success in pushing the war back into Russian territory. Do you think there's an element of that perhaps as well?
Absolutely. I think there's always an element of distraction. And indeed, exactly as you described, Russia has faced certain losses on the Ukrainian battlefield. The fact of the matter is the entire Middle East crisis that we've seen unfolding since October 7, really a multiplication of crises, has been very much an opportunity for Putin to distract the West from the war in Ukraine. And this is another bigger piece of that story.
And of course, Putin was reportedly one of the world leaders who urged Tehran or tried to convince Tehran not to attack Israel. His calculations are more about Russian military hardware in the region that he doesn't want destroyed. Do you think he will be somewhat annoyed that the Iranians haven't listened to him?
Well, I think really what matters is, yes, he might potentially be annoyed, but really what matters to Putin is that he maintains this relationship with Iran. Russia and Iran have been on a very long road towards a key strategic relationship, a much deeper strategic relationship, that was accelerated by the war in Ukraine. The fact of the matter is, Russia and Iran sometimes disagree on smaller issues, but they both agree on the fact that they need each other even more. They're both countries isolated by the West. They both want to see American influence in the Middle East diminished. So they agree on these big picture issues. And Russia, for the first time, needs Iran precisely because of what you just outlined.
What does Russia stand to lose then if there is a major war in the Middle East?
Well, I'm not sure Russia has that much to lose. The fact of the matter is, the only way Russia could potentially lose if Russia is forced to expand more resources that it wants to, that it is able to commit. And Russia has been very careful not to do that. Otherwise, a major crisis in the Middle East is very much to Putin's benefit, and that is precisely why he's actually been actively stoking chaos in this region.
All right, Anna Boshkovskaya, great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Avi Pazner and Dora Navitala here. And Avi, we can see the Russian leader rubbing his hands with glee almost at what's going on here, because while the world is talking about the Middle East, they're not talking about his war with Ukraine.
I don't think that he has any glee about anything. You know, Russia is being invaded by Ukraine right now. Like now we are talking now, battles are going on inside Russia at Kursk. And Ukrainians are really showing military capability, which I was not aware of. So I do not think that Putin... You know, something interesting? Putin, a few days ago, asked the Iranian leader that in case of a strike against Israel, that no Israeli civilian target should be hit. Putin...
Which is out of character for him, to say the least.
That's very interesting. You know, I remember with our friendship with Putin. Before the Ukrainian adventure, we were friends. Bibi was going there all the time. We were invited. There was a lot going on. Now the situation has changed, and now we are again more or less in a situation where we were in the Cold War. Two blocks. On one side, the democracy, in which we take part. On the other hand, the acts of evil.
And we're stuck in the middle. All right, thank you both for now. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, unusual quiet on Israel's northern border over the past day. Amid reports the Lebanese group Hezbollah is evacuating its headquarters in Beirut, perhaps in anticipation of an attack and counter-strike. We're also set to hear from the IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari in the next hour or so. Stay tuned. All of that coming up next. Stay with us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back. There are reports in Lebanese media today that the Iranian-backed terrorist organisation Hezbollah has been evacuating its headquarters in the Dakhia neighbourhood of Beirut. And unusually, for the past few months, the group has not fired any rockets at Israel since 1 o'clock this morning. Let's go to the north and our correspondent Balech Sladin. Balech, is that right? Has it been unusually quiet on the northern border today?
Yes, relatively quiet, definitely. Only 3 attacks this morning, including that one during this night that triggered the sirens in Nahariya as well. So only 2 attacks basically during this day, and we haven't seen anything unusual. But of course, the reports about this evacuation from Dakhia, and also a blog, an intelligence blog in Israel Times, and is saying that also Beirut port is evacuating the ships from the port because of the possibility of a counterattack from Israel that targets the port, maybe because Hezbollah is planning to attack the naval base here in Haifa where I'm standing. That's of course one option, but the scenarios are different, and maybe could be something else, could be an invasion to the military bases according to some military sources in Israel. So all scenarios are being prepared for in Israel, and currently at least we're seeing relative calm.
And Balech, from the people you've spoken to up there, are people nervous? I mean, it's been nearly a 2-week wait now, hasn't it, for this response from Iran and Hezbollah. Are people still worried, or are they going about their daily business?
Well, I would definitely say they're going with their daily business. Everyone's walking to the dogs here in front of me. So basically everyone's living their normal lives because it has been 2 weeks and everyone is waiting. And by the way, just a couple of minutes ago, the Israeli the IDF spokesperson announced that that he's going to talk at 8:30 local time, and apparently he's going to say the same. Nothing is changing in the instructions to the Israeli population. So we're seeing that this time of waiting for response is of course tense, but it's not that everyone here is just waiting and terrified by this fact. They're all just waiting for what the military is going to say. If there is any change to the home front command, then of course that will be taken seriously, but at least for now everything is normal here, also in Haifa.
Okay, thank you very much, Balech Sladin there up in Haifa. Well, with us now, Major Shadi Khalul is a Hezbollah expert. He's a former security zone officer in South Lebanon, and he's the founder and president of the Galilee Aramaic Center. Good to see you, Shadi. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. Now, what do you make of those reports coming out of Beirut? Then the Hezbollah is evacuating the Dakhia neighborhood.
Well, I think this is a sign for maybe some preparations that Hezbollah is trying to do before attacking or making a revenge against Israel and against us, as he promised to do after the assassination of Shukur. But I would like to tell you that I heard about this evacuation about a week ago. I read about it, so it's not new. And maybe it takes them more long time to do it, and they kept doing it until today, and now there's another report about it. But what is important, Laura, about here or in this case to say, it's what our message to Hezbollah. And this message is not passing clear to the other side in Lebanon. And I would like to take advantage of this actually broadcast and give a message to Nasrallah in Lebanon and tell him one thing, that Israel, if this attack will happen, Israel will not allow in a next war with them, full war, that Hezbollah will exist as a terror organization anymore in Israel, in Lebanon. This means we will request the 1559 implementation of UN resolution. Means that it is disarming all militias, include Hezbollah in Lebanon, together with the international community and with the Lebanese people if they love this country to exist. That's the only way they might understand not to attack and not to open a full war with Israel. Otherwise, they will not exist next war, and that message should be clear, and that's what they should understand.
That was the situation before, wasn't it? We had the UN resolution 1701. They were supposed to move back north of the Litani River. No one enforced it. Nobody made Hezbollah stick by it, and here they are right on Israel's border.
That's true. 1701, it's irrelevant, and it's irrelevant. It doesn't function because it's wrong. How you gonna implement 1701 when you are asking Hezbollah to retreat to north of Litani? How this can be implemented? The Hezbollah is not like a foreign force that came from Iran. It is Iranian proxy. It's Iranian training them. But these are Lebanese who live just here nearby. In my like north from us, there is a town called Marun Ras. I see it from my home, and I see the Hezbollah people there. It's the people who live there. So how are you gonna retreat them north of Litani? It's a joke. It's just making people believe in something that is irrelevant.
All right, stay with us, Shadi. I want to bring in Ambassador Avi Pazner and Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital. Avi, you know, of course, the last major war with Lebanon was in 2006. Some people say Israel stopped that war too soon. It was about to have a victory over Hezbollah, but it had to leave and wrap up the war too soon. Do you think it might be different this time around?
I'm not so sure about an Israeli victory in 2006.
No, people say they stopped before.
Yeah, certainly. We stopped and we had an agreement. And I disagree with what has been said about Resolution 1701. I think it was a good resolution. The problem was the implementation. And it is true that, look, 2006, we are 2024, it worked for 18 years. I mean, if it would have been better implemented, it could have worked more. I think that the return to Resolution 1701 is a good solution with enforcement. With enforcement. Yes, Hezbollah deployed north of the Litani River and being enforced so. And I don't think, by the way, that it is reasonable to expect that Hezbollah will disarm. It's true, there is a resolution, but they are masters of Lebanon, you know? So this is also why our war...
I mean, I think the French don't even distinguish, do they, between the military and the political wing of Hezbollah still?
Yeah, they did, yes. So the French do. Okay, we don't. Okay, the Americans don't. The British don't.
So they consider part of Hezbollah to be a legitimate political actor in Lebanon?
By the way, Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government.
Exactly.
Part of the Lebanese parliament. I mean, we have a big problem here with Lebanon as a state. I mean, we are not enemies of the people of Lebanon, but Lebanon as a state is not doing its duty.
All right. Thank you, Avi. Let me get a word from Doron, then we'll bring back Shadi.
Yeah, you have to go back, in fact, to 1982. Lebanon is a state divided, and the fact that we can think of a regime change in Lebanon and execute a regime change full force, this is a challenge that we took it in in the war of 82, and I don't think we'll take now. It's true, there's a valid point that some of those Shia Hezbollah terrorists, they live in those zone that we want them out from. So we'll have to think how to do it to enforce such 1701, to enforce in fire, in IDF patrols. We did it before. We had a security zone. We'll have to rethink in terms of security zone that we used to have in the past.
Shadi, given what Israel is living with now, with this kind of axe hanging over it from the north, do you think that the IDF should have hit Hezbollah hard on October the 8th, as there are reports that some members of the security establishment wanted to do?
I trust our security forces and I trust our leadership that they are having better information than us on why they didn't act back on October 8th. But of course, indeed, they need to do so now, one time, and finish it. And I think only power this organization, it's Islamic jihadi terrorist organizations that don't care about the citizens of Israel. They will do and act what Iran asked them to do. And for so we need to act and initiate an attack on Lebanon. It's not only Hezbollah, and if Avi and the other guests said that the Lebanese state are actually controlled by Hezbollah, means 1701 will not work, means 1559 will not work, and we need to implement a new resolution that only can come by power, and really a great power that will destroy the Lebanese state. And that's the message that the Lebanese people need to understand if they love their country and they don't want war. They don't understand any other talk. And I come from this culture. I am a Maronite myself. I know my Maronite people in Lebanon, and I know the Lebanese mindset, how it works. For now, they don't respect Israel. Israel, it is a weak, it looks weak for them. It looks that Hezbollah as a jihadi group will actually sacrifice Lebanon for thinking that he will control fully Lebanon because he will negotiate the deal after this war, and they will give him Lebanon to be controlled by him. And then when this happens, the next war with us, it would be a catastrophe for Tel Aviv and Haifa. And I don't know where we're going to evacuate then Tel Aviv and Haifa in the next war.
All right,
First of all, I myself know Lebanon very well. I was a company commander in the 82 war all the way to Beirut. So this is an intervention that I'm not sure we will take. Right now, we make the distinction between the Lebanese state, Lebanese infrastructure, and Hezbollah. Sure, if Hezbollah is the only power in Lebanon, then we have a war with Lebanon. If Lebanon, then infrastructure would be target. This is a whole new story. So we have to wait and to see. In military affairs, it's also a question of timing, when your forces are gathered, when you are ready to act, and then the scope of what you do should be measured. You have to be very smart in executing force, and we have a long history of that, and we have to think twice what will be the extent of our counter-attack if they attack.
Okay. All right. Doron Avital, Avi Pasnel and Shadi Khalul, thank you very much indeed to you all. While staying in the north, police forces in the largely evacuated towns on the border with Lebanon are under intense pressure. Aside from dealing with constant incoming missiles and rockets, officers also have to inspect the damage in people's bombed-out homes and then inform the owners of what happened. Our correspondent Matthias Imbar spent a day with the forces in the town of Kiryat Shmona. Here's his report.
Feeling almost alone in the world. Well, in Kiryat Shmona, on the border with Lebanon. This armored Israeli police car is tasked with ensuring the defense of the city and intervening in the event of a strike from rockets, drones, or anti-tank missiles.
There are several types of launches from Lebanon, either blind shots or at pre-established geolocation. One of our main missions is to protect property and people. This house has been hit 3 times. The family didn't want to be evacuated after the first impact, but as you can see, they had no roof left to live under, and they had to leave.
Not a living soul in the street. It's hard to believe that we're here in the new district of Kiryat Shmona. It was a police officer who lived in this house. Everything looks as if time has stopped.
I just went around the garden. I was shocked to see dolls on the ground, toys. Everything remained intact. Just the people living there were evacuated. This is what stands out about this city. The impacts affect civilians. This is not a traditional war between armies. This house belongs to a police officer who works in the area and who evacuated his family. He continues to defend his own house and that of others.
People are waiting for some big attack to take place, whether it's from Hezbollah or Iran. But if you look behind me, you can see a civilian home was hit by a rocket. Down the street, another home and another home. And unfortunately, this is the reality of northern Israel, that there's been a war every single day here since the start of, I believe they even started firing on October 8th. The people who live here, they're our neighbors, they're our friends, they're our family members. And while they may be, hundreds of kilometers away, we're FaceTiming them, showing them their house. Unfortunately, we had to show this family that their house was destroyed, but there's many houses here that just to give them that little bit of relief, we show them, look, everything is good.
This restaurant has not been renovated. It was the first to have been struck by Hezbollah projectiles after the attacks of October 7th. It is precisely since October 7th that the rules have changed, and the attack plans too.
We are located very close to the border, and therefore the impact time is very short. There are also cases where we do not hear the alert and are surprised. This is our role. This is why we are police officers. If necessary, let us protect ourselves, at the cost of our lives, to save the lives of civilians.
Hence the fact that these police officers are equipped with assault rifles. As we finish our on-site report, Officer Buhnik receives a call from the Northern District reporting a threat, ultimately a false alarm. The daily life of these police officers who are forced to be out in the open while the general public stays close to the shelters.
Turkey has welcomed a deal with the United States in which it will receive around 40 F-16 fighter jets. The deal is going ahead despite threats by President Erdogan just a few weeks ago to invade Israel. Ankara also continues to attack Kurds in both Iraq and Syria, claiming that it's targeting the outlawed Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK. Today, Turkey claimed it killed 17 PKK members in Iraq. Kurdish groups say that civilians have also been targeted in those attacks. Meanwhile, Turkey is moving ever closer to normalising ties with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Ankara broke off ties in 2011 over the Assad regime's brutal war on his own people. To talk more about all of that, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Hayetan Cohen-Yanarocak. He's a Turkey expert at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Good to see you again, Hayetan. Thank you very much for being with us. So, it looks as though the Americans will be selling those F-16 fighter jets to Turkey, despite its very belligerent behaviour in the region.
Yeah. First of all, we should underline that this deal was finalized in last January, and it was, let me just remind you, last year we were all talking about the Sweden's and Finland's accession process to NATO. And we all remember that Turkey was the only obstacle for that. And of course, the Turks, in a very creative manner, they circumvented the US imposed CAATSA sanctions against themselves because of their equipment of S-400 anti-ballistic missile systems, which were Russian-made. And therefore, only to pave the way of Sweden and Finland, United States had to ignore the sanctions that itself imposed on Turkey, and as a result, the deal was signed. And nowadays we are hearing that the deal is.
So essentially, Erdogan weakened the Western anti-Putin alliance with this behaviour.
Indeed. It's a chess game. We all know that. And Turkey, like all other states, are trying to get much more power without giving anything back to the US. Turkey is trying to pursue an independent foreign policy, and as a result, from time to time, they are engaging in direct confrontations with the United States. And despite the fact that Turkey was a part of the F-35 Joint Strike Project, it was a member in that project. But however, because of their rapprochement with Russia, they were eliminated. They were taken out from that project. So therefore, Turkey now has no choice but to use the F-16s.
So it's not 100% on board with NATO's main mission at the moment, which is to stop
it's something very complicated.
Putin's aggression. Absolutely. But when it comes to what's happening in the region right now, Israel braced for this attack from Iran. Where does Turkey stand on that? We know, of course, Erdogan has embraced Hamas. He wants to portray himself as a champion of the Palestinian cause. But what about when it goes this step further and we could be on the brink of a regional war?
Well, from Erdogan's perspective, this assassination attempt was not a legitimate one. He had a very good relationship with Ismail Haniyeh, and in this regard, just like the previous Iranian-Israeli confrontation, he is siding with Iran, and he's telling that the previous confrontation was a self-defense, and I really don't think that he will condemn Iran for retaliating to Israel.
The Iraqis came out today, the government in Iraq, and they said that they will not accept the Hamas leadership, any kind of exiled Hamas leadership who might be soon kicked out of Qatar and elsewhere. Do you think Erdogan would accept them? Would he host Hamas?
That's very complicated because in our first conversation tonight, you already mentioned that Turkey is a member of NATO. And I really don't think that Turks would be eager to host Hamas. But, never say never, because we already were surprised many times. Mr. Erdogan surprised us, again and again. So, unfortunately, if I could tell you 3 or 4 years ago, no, this will not going to happen. Unfortunately, today, I cannot tell you that, no, this is not going to happen. But still, I want to believe that it's not going to happen because, again, Turkey still is a member of NATO.
OK, Erdogan has become somewhat unpredictable. And just very, very quickly, he does seem to be moving towards a rapprochement with the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. What would that mean for Israel?
I'm really pessimistic on that. The Turkish defense minister openly told the press that they are looking for a legislation of a new constitution and new elections in Syria. I really don't think that the Syrian dictator will be eager to carry out such processes in his country. And therefore, I don't think that it is going to happen. Turkey will not going to withdraw from the occupied portions in northern Syria.
All right, Dr. Cohen, Yana Raychak, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Great to talk to you. Now, there is outcry in Tunisia after authorities there ruled that only 3 candidates could run in the upcoming presidential elections. That includes the incumbent president, Kais Saied. Another is an ally of the president. Other candidates, including many prominent politicians, were ruled ineligible. It's added to the sense that President Saied is eroding Tunisia's young democracy, a democracy that was hard-won through the Arab Spring protests back in 2011. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Alyssa Pavia, North Africa Associate Director at the Atlantic Council. Good to see you again, Alyssa. Thank you for joining us. And so what is happening in Tunisia right now? Will there be any real challenge to President Saied's rule?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be here. So the upcoming presidential elections are scheduled for October, but the current president, Kais Saied, has implemented a widespread crackdown on basically anyone and all figures that may come in his way in the October elections. And so at this point, he's imprisoned a number of prominent political figures and journalists and human rights defenders. And even just to submit their candidacy, he imposed draconian requirements. And so this is what the result of these requirements were, in the sense that only 3 out of the 14 candidates were accepted to submit their candidacy. And so it is quite clear at this point that he will, face an unchallenged presidential campaign up until October, given all the crackdown that he has implemented until now.
Well, how are people in Tunisia responding to this? Because they fought hard, they protested, and they threw out a dictator over a decade ago, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. How do they feel about having this autocrat taking over their country?
It's difficult to say exactly what the consensus is in the country, given the lack of political freedom and freedom to conduct surveys. It is safe to say, though, that at this point, President Kais Saied still has quite widespread support when talking to people on the ground and political figures engaged in politics on the ground. There's widespread consensus in saying that he has still about 50 to 60% of popular support. Why is that? It's because, Tunisia is still reeling off of 10 years of economic hardships. And yes, they fought hard to have a democracy, but after 2011, there was high unemployment, high inflation for many, many years, high corruption, and that left many disillusioned. And so when that happens, oftentimes in the region, unfortunately, we see people turn to
go for the
autocratic leaders.
Just real quick, Alyssa, what does all of this mean for Tunisia's ancient Jewish community?
So I cannot say this enough, but the ancient Jewish community is unfortunately in danger of extinction. There are only 1,500 Jews left, and they are facing an exorbitant amount of anti-Semitism, both from the local community, but also from President Kais Saied himself. And so I think that it is important for all world leaders when engaging with him to keep that into consideration when turning to him.
Alisa Pavia, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for tonight's show, but do stay with us here on I24 News. Khaled Ben-David will take over in just a few moments, and he'll be bringing you live comments from the IDF spokesman, Daniel Hagari, who will speak as the country finds itself braced once again from a potential attack from Iran and its proxies. We'll have all the very latest for you. Don't go anywhere.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
U.S. sends more battleships and submarines to the Mideast, hoping to deter an escalation as Israel braces itself for a possible strike by Iran and its proxies. We'll have more on the mounting regional tensions. As the U.S. ups pressure on Israel to reach a Gaza hostages for ceasefire deal, Hamas says it won't send a delegation to the summit later this week, where it is hoped an agreement can be finalized. We'll have the latest on that. As U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris faces criticism from supporters of Israel, her husband Doug Emhoff steps forward as the Democratic presidential candidate's point man for Jewish issues and voters. We'll take a closer look. This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben-David. Israel is moving to high alert amid growing signs that Iran and its proxies may launch their expected revenge attack in the next 24 to 48 hours. IDF Chief of Staff Herzl Halevi convened a meeting today of top military commanders to finalize operational plans for multiple fronts and to assess the, quote, ongoing readiness and assessment efforts for both attack and defense. More American ships and submarines have been stationed in Mideast waters, hoping to deter an escalation as Israel braces itself for an aerial assault. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari is expected to give a briefing in the coming hour. We will bring you that live. More in this report from our Zach Anders.
Mr. President, what's your message to Iran?
Facing an attack that could reshape the Middle East, the United States is sending even more military hardware there. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has already moved 2 carrier strike groups and more advanced F-22 and F-35 fighter jets into the region. Sunday, he announced that the USS Georgia, a nuclear-powered guided missile submarine, will follow suit. A rare public admission concerning the movement of America's silent service. Meanwhile, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, or IRGC, say they're in the middle of a military drill in western Iran that will last until Tuesday. Western officials fear this buildup of forces may signal an impending attack. Iran's acting foreign minister reportedly told his Chinese counterpart Monday that Tehran has the right to a, quote, appropriate and deterrent response, with Iranian state media claiming China's foreign minister supports Iran's efforts to defend its sovereignty. In Lebanon, Hezbollah has reportedly emptied its political headquarters in Beirut, moving operations out of the city. This according to Lebanese media channels, while government ministers are raising the alarm.
I can give reassurances about the amount of food in Lebanon, but according to the information I have, there is not enough fuel for more than a month or 5 weeks. How will we store food in refrigerators? If something happens in the country, we won't be able to operate hospitals, supermarkets, and store food due to a lack of fuel.
80 miles south, in Haifa, the same threats persist, but attitudes differ.
There is some tension, but we're not afraid. We know that the State of Israel has a strong army, and the U.S. is with us, so we have nothing to worry about.
Hopes that an Iranian or Hezbollah attack could be stalled by Thursday's renewed ceasefire talks took a hit late Sunday night, as Hamas declared it would refuse to participate. Hamas says Israel must accept their demands, as anonymous Israeli officials reportedly shared late Sunday night that they believe an Iranian attack will come this week.
And joining us in the studio is Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, the former international spokesperson for the IDF, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And we have our correspondents, Nicole Tzedek and Zach Anders. Jonathan, we'll be hearing from the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, later in the program. But you've been in that position. What would be your message now to Israel on what some believe could be the eve of that Iran attack?
Yes, good evening. Many, I think, believe that it is the eve because there's been a lot of hype and a lot of buildup and a lot of psychological warfare and positioning by the Iranians and by other parties in the region to make people believe that. We'll wait and see. I have very strong confidence in the defensive capabilities of the IDF. It's not only the IDF, it's significant American resources in the area, and it's other countries that are going to assist as well. We'll see what the Iranians will do, if they do it. The real challenge here is that the Iranians are aware that last time when they fired about 300 missiles and rockets, they failed in a very big way. And to have any kind of impact, they will have to do more. I think that they are also, as we're speaking now, very much concerned with what happens after their attack and how Israel is going to retaliate. And if you look at Israeli messaging, it's been about quick defense, but then going on a very quick offense. And I think the part of offense has had an effect on Iranian decision-making, that and the positioning of U.S. troops in the region. And I'm sure that there's a lot of diplomacy going on behind the scenes. But bottom line, lots of psychological warfare trying to get Israel on its nerves. I don't think that it's really succeeding. Many people are nervous, but then you see lots of Israelis out on the streets, going about their daily lives, enjoying weather and beautiful Tel Aviv and wherever they are.
Yeah, well, let's go to one of those places where there is concern that it could be a target, especially of Hezbollah attack from Lebanon, and that's the city of Haifa. Our correspondent, Balir Sladin, is there. And Balir, a lot of people are thinking this, or in the next 24 hours, we could see even the start of that attack, and concerns particularly about the city of Haifa, because that has been already, as we know, a target during the second Lebanon war of those Hezbollah rockets.
Yes, exactly. And an intelligence blog today in Israel saying that they are seeing some sort of evacuation of the cargo ships from the Beirut airport. And that's because of the fear of a counterstrike by Israel after Hezbollah may be planning to target the naval base here in Haifa. That could be a possibility. That's one of the scenarios, of course. But I should say that currently, at least, and we're still in the Haifa area, people are going with their daily lives activities, just like normal, walking their dogs, walking to the beach and everywhere. So it's not exactly that the situation is tense. It is tense, of course, but at least for the population is the normal daily life. Now, we're saying that because of the preparations here in the Middle East in general, and by the way, President Biden just talked to the leaders of the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and France about the situation in the Middle East, and we're seeing this preparation by the U.S. Of course, the aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, which is the second one here in the Middle East. That's something that is very rare, of course, and also even the Georgia submarine, this new submarine that, of course, is here to deter Iran and Hezbollah from opening a very large-scale strike against Israel that could lead to a war after all. And also the latest report from the Wall Street Journal that the IDF is sensing in Lebanon and also in Iran that there are some movements that indicate the preparation for an attack. It's not clear whether it's going to be really in the next 24 hours. By the way, the IDF spokesperson is going to speak in a few minutes, and he's going to say that there is no change for the Israeli population, which means that we're still in that situation of waiting and waiting and waiting. It's tense, but at least for now, it is usual for the Israelis here.
All right. And of course, Haifa itself has to be particularly prepared for anything. Balir Sladin there. Thank you for that. Nicole, we mentioned the U.S. boosting its forces here. Of course, the U.S. playing a key role back in April in defending Israel. But it has another reason, defending Israel to avoid that escalation. It's also boosting its forces here, perhaps also as a deterrent in some way on this escalating, Israel's response being to the point where, especially the Biden administration is concerned that this could escalate into an all-out regional war.
From the beginning, about 2 weeks ago, when Israel still has not claimed responsibility for this attack, but really when the assassination news did break, we've been seeing this diplomatic effort from the United States trying to calm tensions. And while they are giving this one hand the backing to Israel with a strong show of it, might I add, even today, the news that they're sending this, they're trying to get a missile submarine, a guided submarine with missiles closer to the Middle East region, and even stating exactly that it is coming to the Middle East. This is more of a rare statement coming from the United States, as they usually don't say exactly where one of these submarines is going to be located. So that in itself does indicate that the United States wants Iran to know that there are their forces in the region. So that way, this is more of a show of deterrence in itself. So by showing and sending these fighter jets, these submarines, these different aerial surveillance guides and troops also, all of them here to back Israel, it's not only to help defend Israel, but hopefully to deter Iran as well. And so that's what the United States continues to work on. But even in these critical moments, we're still hearing from the United States that they believe that a diplomatic solution could still be viable, and that's what they're still continuing to push with Iran, with Hezbollah, with Hamas. They do want to see a diplomatic solution at the end of the day to hopefully calm these tensions that we're seeing.
Right. Theodore Roosevelt saying, speak softly, but carry a big stick, and the big stick is the U.S. military here.
To add off that very quickly, by my understanding, this is an Ohio-class submarine, the USS Georgia. That's not and you might be able to help me with this, that doesn't have anti-air capabilities. It's not a defensive posture. That's an offensive posture. That's signaling, like Nicole said, this is the silent service. The U.S. Navy does not share the whereabouts of these submarines. This is one of the greatest assets. To move that into the region, then say, hey, it's parked right off your waters, and it has Tomahawk missiles to the teeth, and that's an offensive capability weapon. I think that in itself is a message as well.
All right, but the big difference here, and you've been in the North, Zach, covering a lot of this, you have too, Nicole, is that the expected involvement of Hezbollah in this attack, that is the big difference between this scenario and what we saw in April.
It's certainly concerning to imagine the scenarios of what it looks like as a combined attack, but Iran is facing, if they are to collaborate with Hezbollah in an attack of this scale, they're facing some challenges. Distance is the first, and Hezbollah is the closest to be able to attack Israel. The rockets that are going to be fired or could be fired from southern Lebanon at the north could reach there in a matter of seconds. We don't know. I mean, we can't really sit here and speculate what that's going to look like until it happens, right? So this cross-border fire and exchanges that we've seen every day, we've seen a list of weapons that have been used and rockets that Hezbollah has been using, but there are still some that they have not fired yet, or at least independent analysis.
Well, I want to ask Jonathan about that, because the only real live demonstration we saw it, and I was in Haifa during the Second Lebanon War 20 years ago, where they were able to hit the city and cause casualties there. Has the IDF's air defense systems improved enough to have neutralized, especially Hezbollah's capability? For a city like Haifa?
That's a yes and a no. Yes, Israeli air defenses have improved tremendously, but what has improved more is the arsenal that Hezbollah has at its disposal, both in terms of quantity and quality. And if Hezbollah goes all out, which I don't think that Hezbollah is interested in doing, but let's say that they go all out, we're talking about 4,500 rockets fired at Israel every day for a sustained period of time, and that will cause, according to the Israeli assessment, hundreds of casualties every day. That's the worst case scenario. I do not think that we are there, but I think that we should be cognizant of the fact that not only have the Iranians been insulted by Israel and a bloody nose, but Hezbollah sustained a significant loss in the fact that Israel eliminated Shukr, who was the number 2 guy and a very important operator. Hezbollah has an that's an open-ended issue that they need to set straight, and therefore, if you ask me, I am concerned about an Iranian attack, but I think that Israel's capabilities to defend against ones are much better. I am more concerned about Hezbollah's capabilities because they are closer, more combat ready, and more lethal.
All right. We're going to obviously come back to this when we hear Daniel Hagari speak sometime in the coming hour, but let's move on to another issue that's now becoming very interconnected, I think, with this pending attack, and of course that of negotiations for a hostage release and ceasefire deal. Now, the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt, that's the trio of nations trying to mediate this hostage for ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, have called for a summit to be held this Thursday in order to make a sort of big push, perhaps towards finalizing an agreement. U.S. President Joe Biden said yesterday the proposed framework that he announced some 2 months ago is still viable, and Israeli security sources are voicing cautious optimism an agreement could be finalized during the talks. But Hamas is now signaling that it would not be sending a delegation to the talks later this week, which some do see as the last best opportunity to strike a deal. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more.
Talks for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal are set to resume on Thursday, but Hamas is signaling it will not attend. In a statement late Sunday, Hamas said it asked mediators to present a plan based on past negotiations, instead of engaging in a new round of talks for a deal based on amended frameworks.
Our position is clear. There is no need for additional negotiations. There are ideas proposed by the mediators that we have already accepted, and we are ready to implement them immediately. It is no longer acceptable to give the enemy additional time to carry out its aggression against the Palestinian people, and I believe the other factions will not accept that either.
Israeli sources said Hamas's statement is no more than a bargaining tactic, claiming the terror group was never meant to participate in Thursday's meeting, which is supposed to include Israeli, American, Qatari, and Egyptian officials.
Israel's war with Hamas. Is a ceasefire possible before the end of your term?
Still possible. The plan I put together, endorsed by the G7, endorsed by the UN Security Council, etc., is still viable. And I'm working literally every single day to, and my whole team, to see to it that it doesn't escalate into a regional war. But it easily can.
To that end, CIA Director Bill Burns and the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Brett McGurk, are expected to arrive in the region by Thursday, likely visiting Israel before heading to the summit in Doha or Cairo. But this might be challenging for domestic Israeli political reasons, as far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir warned that his party will leave the coalition if Israel goes ahead with a deal.
תראו, אני שומע את הדיווחים על מה שהולך לקרות ביום חמישי בדוחה או בקהיר, ואני מאוד מאוד מוטרד. הרי אנחנו קודשים את החמאס, וכל הדיווחים שאנחנו מקבלים בדרום זה שישראל מנצחת ומובילה. אז דווקא עכשיו ללכת לוועידה, דווקא עכשיו להרים לחמאס בזמן שאנחנו בשמון, כמו שאומרים. ואני כבר אמרתי את זה לראש הממשלה ולאנשיו, זה טעות ללכת לוועידות כאלה. זה טעות בכלל לשבת עם החמאס.
And so, as time continues to run out for the hostages, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will have to choose the survival of his government or the hostages.
And Zach, despite these latest Hamas comments, the U.S. still confident something could be achieved at that Thursday summit.
Yeah, John Kirby's speaking within the last few minutes, and he says he fully expects the talks on Thursday to move forward, that Antony Blinken is still expected, the Secretary of State still expected to make his way into the region. He does caveat and say, quote, we have to also be prepared for what could be a significant set of attacks.
Well, I think, how does that all play in? There is a school of thought, of course, of an attack could come that morning, we would imagine it'd be canceled. There are others who are thinking, well, if that can be done and over with, then the talks perhaps could move forward and maybe even reach something. Skepticism.
Yeah, I'm skeptic. If there is an Iranian attack, as we covered before, I think it will be more serious than the one in mid-April. It will warrant an Israeli response, and I don't think that was something that will be over in a matter of days. What maybe the Americans are trying to do is to leverage the date and the possibility of a hostage deal in order to prevent, through Qatar, indirectly to Iran, an Iranian strike on Israel.
And heartbreaking for the hostage families who are out tonight again, despite the concerns about everything protesting there by the IDF headquarters.
We even saw some of those with family members who are still held captive in Gaza, family members of the 115 hostages. One of the quotes from this evening was, we hope that Iran gets it over with so that we can get back to the focus on these hostage negotiations. And unfortunately, that is the sense from many civilians inside Israel. And that's all part of the psychological warfare that Iran has been toying with Israel for not only the past 2 weeks, but for the past 10 months at this point, truly. And so the fact that they're coming out here and stating that they want Iran to get this attack over with so that these hostage release deal negotiations and ceasefire deal can actually move forward, that's a really strong statement coming out from some of the members of the Hostage and Missing Families Forum.
Right, and with all of this happening, we are seeing some, I would have to say, ugly tensions at the top of the Israeli government between especially the two men who should be handling all these crises. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, for example, today telling the Knesset Foreign Affairs Committee, quote, I hear all the heroes beating the war drums and calling for absolute victory and this other gibberish. Now, absolute victory is, of course, a favorite phrase of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and his office responded afterwards, quote, When Defense Minister Gallant adapts the anti-Israel narrative, he damages the chances of reaching a deal for the release of the hostages. He should have attacked Sinwar, who refuses to send a delegation to negotiations and who was and remains the only obstacle to the kidnapping deal. Israel has only one choice: to achieve a complete victory, which means the elimination of Hamas military and government capabilities and the release of our hostages. And this victory will achieve. Well, of course, leaders can disagree. Right. The prime minister and the defense minister can have differing views. But for something like this to play out publicly in the media on the eve of a potential attack by Iran, it's not a reassuring look.
It's not reassuring. The enemies are listening and watching from Tehran to Gaza. What I think that Gallant is trying to do is basically to pull the security rug under Netanyahu's feet and basically to indicate that there is no better time than now to approach towards a deal, and that the IDF would be able to, and he also alluded to this about the control over the Philadelphia corridor, that the IDF can pull out, execute the deal, get hostages back, and then redeploy. And the fact that it will be pulling out will not, in fact, really harm Israel's ability to fulfill its goals in the war. Those are two very important points, and it is sad to see that such very important officials in Israel cannot handle things internally and let this slip out for the enemies to see, for our allies to see. Doesn't look very good for the future.
You know, I'm trying to remember if there's, in a U.S. context, if there's an example of something like this. And I remember General Mark Milley and President Trump combated, but I don't remember if it was publicly like this while they were both serving, while they were both together in office. I think it was after General Mark Milley retired and left. I can't remember.
Yeah, there were, I think, statements by General Milley about where he should be and whether he should or not the U.S. military should be used internally in the U.S. And the famous photo op, excuse me, outside one of the churches. And there I think there was a very public dispute, but that's a man in uniform and not two elected
I wanted to say, in the context of Israeli history, there have been public disputes between defense ministers and certainly prime ministers, many, and I'm not going to give all examples, but this is a little different because it's in the same party. Because of Israel's coalition politics, that often happened between, for example, when most famously, when Moshe Dayan was brought into a Labour-led government because of public demand. But that was again, there was a multi-party coalition. Right. But here it's the Likud party. It's the same party.
And I think we should emphasize that it's not the first time that differences of opinion between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense, very important one, are made public. And it is regrettable. I think there's, of course, room for discourse, but that shouldn't be available for everyone to see, for enemies and allies to see. It should be in the cabinet, in the closed session of the cabinet that doesn't get leaked to the press.
It doesn't produce a lot of confidence in the staring down an attack.
I wouldn't think so. All right. Well, we're going to turn now to Gaza itself and the battlefield there. The IDF today announcing the death of Sergeant Omer Ginsburg, 19 years old, of the Paratroopers Brigade. He was killed by a Hamas sniper in Khan Yunis. Now, the IDF also identified a further 12 Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants who were killed in Saturday's airstrike at the Al Tabain school in Gaza City. That brings to 31 the number of verified terrorists who were taken out in that operation. Meanwhile, Hamas has yet to provide any proof of its claim that dozens of civilians were killed in the strike, even though international media and officials were quick to adopt that narrative. And Nicole, again, it's very similar. We've seen this play out again and again in Gaza. The Shifa hospital, Hamas makes a claim, hundreds dead, women and children. Immediately, the international media picks up that picks up by officials. And then as the days go by, evidence doesn't emerge, but of course the headlines were done.
The headlines are already out there, and so even though Israel is investigating this, just as they should, and taking the time to look into these claims that Hamas is putting out there, and now days have gone by and they're stating it wasn't only 19 operatives, it was actually 31 operatives that they know were inside this building, both Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And they said they used 3 types of small, precise munitions to specifically target the level, the floor of the school where these operatives were hiding out and using as a command center. And still, with all of this evidence that is amounting, that shows that it's very highly unlikely that because of the ammunition that they used, they would ever be able to kill the number that Hamas is claiming. Still, that is the number that the international media is running with. And this comes back to the dilemma that Israel faces of trying to be correct and trying to be fast.
Let's ask Jonathan, who had to deal with this in real time when you were doing your reserve duty at the El Shifa hospital. Very similar scenario. Is there something more Israel can be doing, or does it has to, the fact that it's trying to deal with facts as opposed to Hamas just coming out with lies, puts IDF at a disadvantage it can't match?
So a few things. I was on duty when an explosion occurred at the El Ahli hospital in late October, early November. Hamas claimed 500 killed.
Yes, of course.
BBC, New York Times, everybody went with the Hamas statements without checking, without even caveating it. And after it became apparent that actually not so many people had been killed and it was a Palestinian rocket, the story shifted. And for the first time, I saw both BBC and New York Times issue a correction and a statement. We're not seeing it this time. We're seeing media, reputable media organizations using Hamas numbers as if they are true, and not having any accountability for the fact that they're getting it wrong again. And if you ask what the IDF could do differently, then it is to preempt. What we see the IDF doing now is playing catch-up, and in media, you never win by playing catch-up. It should be done in a different order, where just as the bombs are dropping on that target, there should be a press release out saying, we just struck this location, not wait for the media cycle to start with hospital and mosques and all of the horrible visuals that were coming out, but to preempt it and not only to respond afterwards. And last thing, now Israel should be holding media organizations accountable, and it should demand media organizations that they actually use credible information and not numbers based on Hamas.
All right, well, there are reasons, and we won't go into why the army hasn't functioned that way, but perhaps it will. You are one of the voices it should be listening to. Please stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, and remember, Daniel Hagari will speak soon.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to the Rundown on I-24 News, and a reminder that IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari is expected to give a briefing in the coming minutes. We'll bring that to you live. You see the podium there set up at the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. Now let's refocus on northern Israel, where the day-to-day challenges of the local police force... Oh, we have Daniel Hagari. Let's...
Erev Tov.
Good evening. Over the last few days, we have been following our enemies and the developments in the Middle East with a specific emphasis on the Hezbollah and Iran. At the same time, we're attacking in Lebanon every day. We have increased various patrols and from the air over Lebanon. We are attacking any threat that we identify, ready to intercept any threat real time. We know and we're expecting what could possibly happen. We are ready in every possible way, and we will act the moment we are given that order. The questions have been coming from the public. Your preparedness and your readiness of the public is very important, but at the moment there is no change in the various assessments and instructions of the Home Force Command. The moment there is any change, we are aware of anything that changes in reality. And yes, in the north, they are being attacked with UAVs, and our job is to ensure that you can go back to your homes and that your security is enforced. We want to defend the whole area. And as we saw on Saturday night, there were 12 children murdered in Majd al-Shams. So we have offensive preparedness the whole time, and we will be ready to act. We are not waiting when Hezbollah attacks. We are acting the whole time. The moment there's a threat, we remove it. We are at a climactic moment from the point of view of preparedness and readiness. We are aware of all the difficulties and the uncertainty that is growing, especially in the summer, with the various summer camps and the vacations now. So we are following the situation 100%, and we will let you know and update you. And the moment we can do so, as early as possible, we will adapt those the instructions. We will do so based on what we receive from our intelligence. We are doing everything possible in order to let the routine continue at the same time with preparedness and readiness. We, of course, will update you about anything that changes. The various Home Front Command will let you know what is happening, and the IDF. I am here during this evening and over the next few days to update you, and I will translate the situation for you exactly as it is. And for the moment, there is no change in those instructions. Yesterday, a cell of terrorists murdered an Israeli citizen and wounded seriously another one. We would like to extend our condolences to the family. We are now pursuing the terrorist. The IDF have continued actually guarding the area of the east of Samaria, and we are trying to identify and find that cell. They are fighting in Khan Yunis as well, and there are very focused and targeted attacks there, above and below ground. Last night, the division that is fighting there lost one of its soldiers to Ofer Ginsburg, and we have extended our condolences, and we will continue being along with them in their grief. And we do not forget for a moment that there are hostages being held in Gaza, and we are very troubled by their health, and of course their mental condition. And we know they're being helped in horrific conditions. All of the military entities are doing everything possible in order to try and bring them home as quickly as possible. It is our moral commitment, it is our obligation, and we will do so. This ongoing, endless fighting, we have been with everyone along the entire way, and we know what happened on the 7th of October, the horrific destruction that they actually caused. And today is the holiest of those Remembrance Days here in Israel. But we will ensure the security of every single citizen of the State of Israel on this holy day as well. If you identify launch pads that are ready to actually launch a barrage of missiles at Israel, will you get rid of them immediately? And when you're following through what is happening with Iran, do you feel that we're coming closer to what they intend to do? We are and will do anything that is necessary in order to defend the citizens of the State of Israel. And we are following everything 24/7. We are doing a surveillance with our allies from the United States. If we're talking about the Americans that have brought over not only the troops and other things, we're doing so 24/7. Will there be an early warning for the public like in April, or do we need to be prepared that might only be a siren 2 minutes before? Well, this evening especially, I've come to talk about that and the need to talk to the public and explain this complex situation. Our role is to give the public time to organize themselves. That is our role, and we're doing so 24/7. We have our finger on the pulse the entire time, but there are situations where we will be required to do so suddenly in an urgent situation, like it happened actually in the north. And by the way, that can happen every single day. But we are aspiring to achieve this kind of warning in advance. That is why we are following things so closely. Despite everything that might have been said over the last 2 weeks, we have not as yet changed those instructions given by the Home Front Command, and we will do so, and we will adapt and adjust things in accordance. Is there an assessment that Iran will attack over the next 24 hours? As I said before, we are following everything, specifically what is happening with Iran. And of course, we're not doing it alone, but with the United States and our other partners. I have not heard about this assessment, and I'm standing steadfast about what I said before. We will update the public immediately when we hear, and we will try and give a warning as early possible in advance. And vis-a-vis these reports, yes, there were a plethora of reports over the last week. So you have to remember that we have committed that we will immediately give a change to those instructions if necessary.
All right, we've just heard Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson. Of course, the main point he made is that Israel is ready for any eventuality, but there are no changes in their instructions from Home Front Command. People should go about their lives as usual unless they receive further instructions. And he touched on a number of other issues as well. Still with us, the former IDF international spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus, and Nicole Tzedek and Zach Anderson. Jonathan, let me get your impression about nothing that much new there, but I guess he felt, even as we're speaking, reports coming out of media, Iran is fueling its rockets, et cetera, and so forth. And I think the IDF spokesperson had to come out and say, make an appearance tonight, in a sense, to sort of calm the public.
Well, either him or the prime minister, but we haven't seen the prime minister address the Israeli public when it was anything but pristine conditions to take credit for military activities. Having said that, I think it's very important that the IDF spokesperson does that, and what he's trying to do is to calm people. Last time when Iran attacked, Israel had intel and Israel was prepared, and Israel staged a very effective defense. And I think that's the really important indicative. When there will be intel and Israel is scanning the areas and looking for the various telltale signals that there will be an attack, if there is intel, Israel will issue guidance to the civilians, and that's the only thing that matters. The rest is lots of speculation.
All right, then let's talk about the public, because even as we're speaking, I could see coming over social media and even general media, all kinds of reports about Iran prepping missiles, drones. But again, the IDF spokesperson said, as of now, there is no step to justify immediately now. Of course, it could change quite quickly, any change in home front commands. Now, one of the things that Admiral Hagari touched on are the developments in the West Bank, where IDF troops and Israeli security forces are still searching, as he said, for the terrorists who carried out yesterday's deadly attack on Route 90 in the northern Jordan Valley. 23-year-old Jonathan Deutsch, the Beit Shan resident who was killed in that drive-by shooting, was buried today in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas was on the move today, arriving in Moscow ahead of a meeting tomorrow with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who one could imagine has his own problems to deal with right now. Let's go to Palestinian security analyst Mohammed Najib in Ramallah. And we have to think, Mohammed, that Vladimir Putin's attention is directed elsewhere to that Ukrainian invasion on Russian territory, which is ongoing. So what does Mahmoud Abbas expect to get out of this trip at this time?
Yeah, actually, Abbas, looking that the Palestinian Authority will take control over the Gaza Strip after the stop of the war, so he wants the Russian support for him. Putin and Abbas enjoys close ties since a long time, and in the 2 days visit of Abbas, where he's supposed to meet Vladimir Putin tomorrow, he will discuss the Russian role in Gaza and how they can help to support the ongoing exerted efforts to stop the war, to allow the entry of the humanitarian assistance to Gaza, and the Russian role that can help the Palestinian Authority to take over Gaza after the stop of the war. Khalid.
Right. Just one thing, Mohammed. Reports in the media today that the Palestinian Authority coming up to the General Assembly in the UN every year, they make a new type of diplomatic push. This time it's going to be focused on trying to get an international arms embargo on Israel, and also I guess a BDS embargo on all goods in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria.
Actually, the Palestinian Authority is trying to punish Israel through the international legal institutions. Sometimes they go to the ICC, sometimes to the Court of Justice, and at the United Nations, when Abbas at his speech every September, he tries to urge the war to pressure Israel and to adopt. But they start usually, they say something, but they don't follow that, and they care, because Israel also can punish them by stopping the tax money transfer to the Palestinian Authority, which endangers the existence of the Palestinian Authority. So they know that there is a heavy price to be paid if they take such serious steps against Israel. So they say that in the media. They ask their friends in the world, like South Africa, who did that to the Court of Justice, and they hope some pressure on Israel. But this is the maximum they can do.
All right. Well, from the Israeli perspective, frankly, it's hard to see what they're accomplishing through these steps. Mohammed Najib there in Ramallah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, let's turn now to U.S. politics. Vice President Kamala Harris's Jewish husband, Doug Emhoff, is on a bit of a spree of public appearances, highlighting the surge in anti-Semitism around the world. And while he has always been a vocal advocate for the Jewish community, this new push comes as opponents of the Democratic presidential candidate are trying to paint her as the wrong choice for Jewish voters. Nicole Tzedek has more in this report.
While leading the White House delegation for the 2024 Paris Olympics, Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, is trying to make a mark outside of the Games.
The Biden-Harris administration is working with Congress to support a $2.2 million grant for UNESCO's international program on Holocaust and genocide education. Once completed, This funding will help UNESCO promote accurate Holocaust education, counter hate, and advance the United States priorities amid this dramatic surge in anti-Semitism.
Combating anti-Semitism, pledging a new grant to the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO, while also visiting the scene of one of Paris's most heinous anti-Semitic attacks from 1982.
I was sickened when I heard that the same memorial I had visited was defaced just a few months ago. There is a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism occurring around the world.
The first ever Jewish vice presidential spouse has been vocally combating anti-Semitism since the October 7th attack by Hamas. But this public push in France also comes after Kamala Harris's opponents are trying to paint her and her VP pick, Tim Walz, as the wrong choice for Jewish voters.
My view on it is it just highlights how radical Kamala Harris is. This is a person who listened to the Hamas wing of her own party and selecting a nominee.
Vance's statement came after Harris did not choose Jewish Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as her presidential running mate. Despite media speculation, he was a top pick.
Many people said repeatedly that the reason Kamala Harris was going away from the Josh Shapiro selection is because they were worried about anti-Semitism. They were worried about certain voters. They were worried about some of the leaders and the grassroots activists in their party wouldn't take a Jewish nominee. I think it's despicable. I think it's disgusting.
But Emhoff says his wife has always cared about the Jewish community and fought for him to spearhead the battle against anti-Semitism.
When my wife was sworn into office as Vice President of the United States, and I assumed the position of second gentleman, I actually never thought that working on the safety and security of Jewish Americans and Jews around the world would be one of my areas of focus. But she encouraged me to embrace this role.
Taking the fight against anti-Semitism abroad, while the fight for the presidential election remains at home.
Well, for more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim in New York. And Mike, to be fair, Doug Emhoff, I think they call him the second gentleman, has been the White House point man on anti-Semitism before this. But it is interesting, just this week, he went to the Paris Olympics representing the White House, and what he chooses to do, go to the Jewish neighborhood there and eat a falafel in Paris, not the necessarily the food that people go to Paris for, perhaps definitely highlighting his role in the Jewish community at this particular time.
Listen, Doug Emhoff, to his credit, stepped up in an incredibly difficult time for the Jewish community during the COVID crisis, which we saw a rapid rise in anti-Semitism well before October 7th of last year. And he said, listen, I'm proud to be a Jew. I want to take this issue on of anti-Semitism. I want to be the face of the Jewish community within the White House. He didn't have to do that. And he wasn't known as, not an Orthodox Jew, wasn't known for his activism or advocacy within the Jewish community prior to Kamala Harris's time in the Biden administration. He took it upon himself to take on that role. So kudos to him. And it led to the development of an anti-Semitism plan for the White House, which, had mixed reviews coming out of the gate. But hey, it was something to get the ball rolling. Since then, again, in the midst of a presidential campaign in which his wife has been involved to one extent, or now to a greater extent, we have seen Emhoff kind of tail off when it comes to anti-Semitism issues. He hasn't been at the forefront anymore, certainly hasn't been calling out anti-Semitism from the left to any great extent. And there's always been that argument, Kalev, both from the left and the right. Listen, it's not really fighting anti-Semitism if you're only fighting it from the opposite side of the political spectrum. In that case, you're just using anti-Semitism as a political football, as a weapon for your own cause. And both the left and the right have been accused credibly of doing that. So Emhoff went to Paris, spoke at a memorial service, a remembrance ceremony for a Palestinian terror attack that occurred there in France at a Jewish restaurant some years ago. He also spoke at UNESCO about a grant of some $2 million plus that the U.S. is providing UNESCO to combat anti-Semitism. That's a whole different story dealing with the UN and anti-Semitism. But we're not seeing on American soil, when the cameras are on at campaign stops and during briefings with the press, we're not seeing that same Doug Emhoff really take on anti-Semitism to the level that he was willing to do, or purportedly willing to do, just a year or less ago.
All right. Well, Mike, I'll just say you're heading off to go to the Democratic Convention in Chicago. It kicks off, I think, on the 19th. And we'll see what role Jewish issues, anti-Semitism, and also Israel have at that convention. We saw it so prominently on display, for example, at the Republican convention. Mike Wagenheim there in New York, thank you for that. And Jonathan, clearly there is some, I guess, triangulation, they call it a little bit, in the U.S. politics dealing with this issue with Kamala Harris, especially given, for example, some of the remarks on Israel she's made even lately.
Yeah, and if the intention is to bring a soothing message to Jewish potential voters, doing it by involving a UN organization, like in my mind, like UNESCO, is not the way to go. That is not assuring Jews of anything. That is perhaps assuring them that it will go wrong and it isn't serious. If you want to combat anti-Semitism in the US, go to US campuses, hold heads of US universities to task, deal with defacing US monuments and genocide slogans that are seen in DC and in New York. There are so many things that can be done, but to do it through the UN, I don't think that's the smart or the right thing to do.
Fair enough, and we'll see how this plays out in the election. Now, slight change of pace here, a little on the positive side. There is another well-known Jewish figure speaking out against anti-Semitism nowadays, but certainly there are no political motives involved. Singer Noah Kirel has won fame well beyond Israel through her international hits and representing this country in the Eurovision Song Contest. Now as she prepares for her fourth concert at Tel Aviv's Hayakon Park, that's only at age 23. Kirel is also speaking out in support of Zionism and Jewish pride to students in the U.S. And she spoke with reporter Sivan Sisay of our Hebrew channel at I-24 News. Let's take a listen.
With the flag, praying for better days. Amen. Let's do it. Am Yisrael Chai.
Last weekend, singer Noah Kirel came to the summit event of the ICC organization in Washington, D.C., and put Zionism on display.
Can I have the flag for a second? I just have to. Wait. I just want to say that these days, more than ever, we need to be proud to be Israeli, proud to be Jewish. And it really means a lot to me to be here today to represent my country. And the next song has so much power, the power of the unicorn.
The performance took place in front of thousands of students, Jews from campuses all over the U.S., in times when the campuses are saturated with pro-Palestinian demonstrations and Israel hatred. Such pictures are especially moving. These days, the singer is preparing for her fourth performance in Hayakon Park in September. She will be the first singer and the youngest to achieve this.
I'm going to give my 1,000,000% until the last drop of sweat. Work the hardest I can to make it a truly unforgettable show. It feels real to me already, like a tradition in Hayakon Park, something I give my audience every year. And precisely at a time like this, it's something I want to continue giving and show that we are not retreating, but continuing to advance.
In recent months, Noah experienced quite a few hardships. Her cousin Yuri Yaish was murdered in February in a shooting attack. Kirel was also accused of copying her last song, I, from a song by Meghan Trainor called Me Too from 2016. Still, Noah, being Noah, overcame these obstacles and continues to prove that she is one of the best singers in Israel, who is now also conquering hearts in the USA.
Good show, I'm sure. Good showing by Noah. Now, as we noted, certainly in our concern tonight that could see Iran and its proxies launching their threatening strike against Israel in the next 24 hours. We have to note this evening, as Daniel Hagari did, it's also the start of Tisha B'Av, a traditional day of prayers, mourning and fasting on what is said to be the anniversary of the destruction of the first and second holy temples in ancient Jerusalem. Now, many religious Jews will be in synagogue tonight praying and reading Echad, the biblical Book of Lamentations. Here's a bit of a message from IDF Homefront Command, especially for Tisha B'Av.
Dear synagogue goers, we are in an emergency situation, and we will be in one for several days to come. The people of Israel need your many prayers in the coming days. Therefore, it is important to act according to the instructions of Homefront Command, including in synagogues. You must act wisely when you receive warnings in order to avoid confusion, panic, and tension that endangers those who are praying. Follow the instructions, and with God's help, we will triumph.
And a good reminder, especially from Homefront Command, even if you're in Beit Knesset, in the synagogue, you should be observing. And Tisha B'Av, of course, a day of sadness for Jews and Jewish history, but another message of Tisha B'Av is that the Jewish people rise above these various calamities and disasters, and hopefully that holds true as well. I do want to thank Jonathan Conricus for joining us this evening, Nicole Tzedek, and Arzak Anders, and to all those who are observing Tisha B'Av, which is a fasting day. We usually say Tzum Kal, may you have an easy fast, and please, to all the public that's watching this that is in Israel, keep in mind you should be observing all of the home. You should be aware of where your shelter is. And if it's a personal shelter, you should make sure that it's stocked with whatever necessary preparations are, if that involves an extended stay there. So please stay safe and stay calm. And keep following I-24 News for the latest updates. Thank you for joining us.